I never planned to bring another cat home that night in Shanghai. But there she was, a tiny orange kitten, no more than 5 weeks old, soaked and shivering under a parked car on a busy street. Her eyes were already different wide, but somehow empty. I wrapped her in my scarf, whispered that she was safe now, and took her straight to the city shelter, where I volunteered. I thought I was saving her. For the first few weeks, she seemed okay. She ate a little, slept in the corner I made for her. But then the shelter filled up, just like it always did. More strays, more noise, more people coming and going at all hours. I was working long shifts in the city, trying to pay rent and still keep the rescue going. Every night when I checked on her, those same wide eyes just stared back at me empty. She stopped playing. She stopped purring. She barely ate unless I sat there in silence for an hour. The vet said it was depression. I said it was my fault. I had pulled her off the street and put her in a place that felt just as loud and lonely as the world I grew up in. You see, I was raised in an orphanage. I know what it feels like when nobody has time to really see you. I thought I was giving her a better life, but I was repeating the same mistake, offering shelter without the quiet kind of love she needed. One morning I found her curled so tight in the back of her kennel that she didn't even lift her head when I called her name. That was the day something in me broke. I realized if I left her there any longer, I might lose her completely. But the shelter was already at capacity, and my tiny Shanghai apartment wasn't much better. The rent was killing me. The city noise never stopped. And I was exhausted from trying to be everything to every animal that came through the door. I sat on the floor of that shelter at 2 a.m., crying like I hadn't cried since I was a little girl, and I made a decision that scared me more than anything. I was going to bring her back with me to the countryside. The drive from Shanghai to my little mountain village took almost 12 hours. I kept looking over at the carrier on the passenger seat, terrified that those empty eyes would stay that way forever. Every time we stopped for gas, I whispered the same thing. "We're going home, little one. Real home this time." When we finally pulled up to my small sanctuary, nestled between the hills and the river, the air smelled like pine and wet earth. No traffic, no sirens, just birds and the soft sound of water. I carried her inside and set the carrier down in the quiet room I had prepared. For 3 full days, she didn't move. She just sat in that same tight ball, staring at nothing. I sat with her every evening after feeding the other animals, not pushing, not talking too much. I knew from my own childhood that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is simply stay close and wait. On the 4th evening, something shifted. I was sitting on the floor, reading an old book, when I felt the lightest touch against my hand. She had crept out of her corner, still silent, still careful, but she reached one small paw and rested it on my fingers. Those eyes weren't empty anymore. They were watching me, really watching. That was the moment I understood. She hadn't been broken. She had just been waiting for a place quiet enough for her heart to open again. In the weeks that followed, I watched her come back to life in the gentlest ways. She started sitting in the window to watch the leaves move. She played with a piece of string for the first time in months. And one rainy afternoon, just like the night I found her, she climbed into my lap, curled up, and let out the smallest, softest purr I had ever heard. Bringing her here didn't just save her. It saved something in me too. I left the big city because I thought I couldn't afford to keep rescuing animals there. What I didn't realize was that I was also running toward the kind of life I had always needed. Slow, steady, surrounded by mountains instead of concrete. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like you were trying your hardest and still falling short, I want you to hear this. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is admit you got it wrong and try again in a different place. That little orange kitten is sleeping on the windowsill right now, with the first snowflakes of winter drifting softly past the glass. She still has quiet days, but her eyes aren't empty anymore. And as I watch the snow quietly cover the mountains, I realize neither are mine.
西瓜，小波浪，小波浪。